All right, we'll call to order the special meeting of the Northwest Education Services Board of Education. And the first order of business is for Dr. Sigler to call roll, please.
Tate. Here. Brown.
Here.
Carpenter. Here. McKellar.
Here.
Here. Here. Fisher.
Here.
Berge.
I am here. And I'm wondering, do I need to give my quote, my script today?
Sure.
Okay. I, Rachel Berge, am attending the board meeting of May 25th, special work session remotely. I'm physically located in Kalkaska County in the state of Michigan. I'm able to have two-way communication for this board meeting, and please record this public announcement in the meeting minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There's a recommendation under item 1D to approve the May 25, 2021 agenda as presented.
So moved.
Support. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Welcome, everyone, to this special meeting. Looking forward to hearing some really interesting reports today, and I'm glad that you could all be with us. Is there anyone here live that would like to address the board at this time? It is public comment. Brandy, is there anyone waiting?
Good evening, Mr. Fisher. There is no one that has requested public comment at this time.
Thank you. All right, move on to item 2, Dr. Sigler.
So thank you for taking time this afternoon. We're very excited to be able to present to you some incredible work that's been done by our staff and our leaders. You're going to hear from 11 committee members that have been working tirelessly on the advancement of our strategic plan and our goals that we've outlined. And so I don't want to steal any of their thunder, but I do want each and every one of them to know how much we value and appreciated their leadership through this process. Clearly, the work could not have been done if it wasn't for their guidance, leadership, and the work of their committee members. So without further ado, the first goal that we're going to talk about is develop a structure and process to increase understanding of TBA ISD roles, supports, and available programming. And I'll welcome Sarah Orley to the podium.
Hello, good afternoon. Dr. Sigler said my name is Sarah Orley. I think this is my first time actually coming to one of the board meetings, so it's my first time presenting to you. But a little bit about me, I work at Life Skills Center within our organization. And so myself and Tina Shellick have been co-chairing this goal for, this is our second year because it is a phase 1 goal. And really, these were the 2 objectives we gave ourselves early on, is to come up with a comprehensive outline of all of our roles, supports, and programs. And then secondly, to how are we going to convey what those structures or processes are to all of our stakeholders. And then you can see our committee members listed below. So our work was a little bit of a journey. The first year was really kind of figuring out what we were going to do with this goal. It started to grow and grow and get really big. And we had people calling us like, okay, you're working on job descriptions. What's my job going to, job description? Like, wait a minute, we don't feel like experts in that area. So let's scale it back. And so really we came down to some targeted artifacts and pieces of work. So those 3 bullets there will really kind of define what that work was. So the first is an organizational chart, and the intent is that there's contact information for every department, every role, phone number, like if I needed human resources, who is that? How do I get a hold of them? And then the idea that that chart could be shared.
Sorry.
No, you're good. That chart could be shared internally and externally. what we have found is a lot of our work started overlapping with the rebranding committee and the work of our communications department. So while there is that initial organizational chart that exists through rebranding, which I don't want to take too much of what they're going to share, we're seeing that structure shift a little bit in how we organize our organization. So I'll kind of circle back to that in a minute. And then the other thing that we did is worked with all of our departments internally and had them come up with a self-description of 200 words or less, who they are, what they do, what service they provide to our organization. And all of that documentation lives in a shared Google Drive, accessible to all of our committee members, with the intent that that information will be used for brochures, website content, job descriptions, services, programs, it's all there. So to kind of conclude it and wrap everything up, we met with the communications department and the rebranding committee, shared this work, and we're going to ask that they move it forward for us as they finalize our new brand. And I'm assuming website design redesign will be part of that. And so they'll take our work and move it forward. I think that was it. Does anyone have any questions?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
So that org chart, tell me how people access that org chart and how they might use it. I mean, I see there's contact information, but how would I, if I'm an employee, actually get access to it or eventually get access?
Yeah, so the intent would be as part of either a new employee orientation or in the opening day packet for all internal stakeholders, as well as we see it living somewhere on the website, maybe for external stakeholders. And also existing, I know there's another committee that's doing some work on, like, if there's a new leader or administrator in the district, this could be something provided to them as a new hire to know just some basics about our organization. So definitely will probably be fine-tuned through the communications department, but it would live there and then they could distribute as necessary. And we see it being updated annually, obviously.
I have no other.
Are you sure? No.
Well, I probably could make up one, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
That's good. I mean, it's accessible. It'd be, I mean, something that would be easily accessible on a phone, mobile.
Yeah,
Some way.
the idea is kind of a one-stop cheat sheet if I was, just
Great.
in or, if I was newer to the organization and wondering, like in my role, one time I had a question about early college. So then hopefully I could just pick that up, know who my early college person is and all with my question for sending an email. So.
Great.
Yeah.
And as Sarah said, as a reminder, part of the rebranding was really to take that traditional organizational chart and kind of turn it on its end and really have students and programming be the ones that are showcased, where we are more as a administrative support and more. And so that's kind of the idea, highlighting that nuance.
I like the idea that it's going to be possibly on the website, probably for talent attraction, so we're posting jobs and see how they get in there.
Okay.
So thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your leadership and Tina's leadership on that goal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to the second goal, which is explore and evaluate student transportation structures and systems. And I'll introduce Mark Wills and Sean Biddle.
So good afternoon, board. Mark Wills, supervisor at Oak Park School, with
Sean Biddle, Director of Finance.
in recognition of that, I'm just pleased to share the update. As Nick indicated, it takes many within our village, if you will, to help continue to raise our children. And I just want to recognize those committee members as well as our cabinet members that help guide our thought process as well as outcomes. So thankful to Linda Galecki, as well as Kara Greilich, and committee members as well, Jeff DeRosa from Anselona Schools, Jeff Tousley from Brentford, Alberta Schools, and then with Northwest Education Services team members, Carrie Gaudet, Becky Goodwin, Marty Agwini, and I think that was it. And then also from Dean Transportation and Partnership, we had Fred Dolker, who's their CPI instructor, as well as Jade Lennox, the transportation supervisor. So with that,
Nick, are you able to?
There you go.
there it is.
Oh,
It disconnected there, but it's okay. So if you recall last year when we reported and we had to pause during the pandemic, a lot of our in-person services, we were still fortunate to continue meeting and really thinking through what did this year hold for us. So as you can see with the first objective, by September 2020, the overall goal was to improve students' experience while being transported as measured by incident reports. Happy to report, we've completed that, and it will be an ongoing and will require quarterly reviews. What we discovered was, while we focus on students' experience, we started learning more about the adults in their world too, who cares for them. And that first phase on the bus, as well as that first phase before they get off the bus. And from a CPI standpoint, what that's referred to in our model is integrated experience, otherwise known as how do we maintain those relationships. So an outcome with that was, one, not did we just learn how to improve students' experience, but ultimately, how do we work with the staff that support the students transporting to and from school.
Our second objective was that by January of 2020, we would have enough additional routes to reduce the overall travel time for at least 90% of our students to below 2 hours for direction. And we actually completed that, and we were successful. The goal was met. We had 31 routes operating prior to the shutdown, and we started the year with 27. So we increased routes. We brought our percentage of students with less than 2 hours above 90%. During this current school year, we are operating with fewer routes, and there are a few factors affecting that. One is that staffing difficulties that a lot of industries are experiencing are also hitting bus drivers. And so Dean is having a really hard time staffing some of those routes. And we've had pauses, we've had classes that are on quarantine, we've had students in and out, so Dean tries to adjust their routes and be the most efficient that they can be. But we have slipped below the 90% target for the current year. We're operating at somewhere between 86 to 88% most months. And going forwards, we look at this as completed, but also something that should be continually reviewed. In our transportation consortium group, which is a group of superintendents and ISD leaders who are part of this transportation consortium, will be continuing to review student ride time as part of their group's work.
And that third objective was also identified by this committee, that by June 2020, we will increase our communication and data sharing with internal and external stakeholders. And I'm happy to share with you today is our communication protocol as one of those outcomes that Nick's gonna present here for us. And just want you to take a look at, as we color coded and really identified when are those circumstances, not just relevant, but urgent, that need immediate response. And so we have identified student health incident, and you look on the left-hand side, that immediate communication, and then we identify those roles responsibilities by the driver and dispatch in partnership with Dean, and then any follow-up communication necessary between the center-based supervisors or Carol Grad. We've also identified that communication as well with student behavior incidents, and that is also another area when we collect that data by the number of incidents reported to our center-based programs. So we're doing a little bit more work through that as well to define what are those major and minor behaviors and what are those specific forms that may require, again, urgent response or again, follow-up communication, depending on the level of severity of behavior. The next domain there, you can see as well, when there's a bus accident, making sure as we partner there with Dean that all individuals are contacted, including Carol, and again, I know Nick is notified as well. And working again with center-based supervisors. So it kind of has that step-by-step process. We also identified if Dean Transportation is going to be 15 to 20 minutes off their bus schedule, that they are contacting one, the parents if it's going home, but if they're coming into school, it's contacting the centers as well. So we can get that communication out to the classrooms respectively. And then if there's any change in routes, we've been working in partnership there with Dean as well to maintain accurate records as well as which students are on which routes. With that, open the floor. Any questions you may have?
Yeah, I'm curious on this 90% transport time under 2 hours. Have you kind of broken that down kind of beyond that? Because, you know, what percentage is below an hour and a half? What percentage is below an hour? I'd be curious to see what that distribution is.
And then how many, is it all the way up to 10% that are over 2 hours?
That's a good question. Dean actually provides that information to us periodically, and they have it really broken down by student. I'm gonna ask the rest of my committee if is it to the level of detail that we can really identify those particular routes or particular students that are.
It is on the per student basis, but it's a good question. We can look at that data to see if we can extrapolate that.
I have a follow-up on that 90%. I mean, how far did we move the needle there? What was it before all of this in terms of percentage of students, 2 hours or less?
It's another great question, Jason, and I think we'd have to go back to our baseline data when we looked at that, because that was some of the gathering of information.
Yeah.
We didn't have a clear baseline established, but certainly can look into that as well. And
I mean, that's a good enough answer. I mean, the fact is we may not have actually known the number. We defined it as 90%. It's not like we knew it was 88% before we moved it a tiny amount. We just didn't track it. Yeah, okay. I had a question on the communication protocol, which going back to prior to this protocol, what was actually happening? Was it an ad hoc communication, just sort of whatever people wanted to, whatever protocol they wanted, they followed?
No, so my understanding is Dean has their policy too, especially when it involves bus accidents as well as healthcare plans with say students' medical needs. So that communication was already occurring with centers. There just wasn't an actual process documented, if you will.
Okay.
Carol can correct me if I'm wrong as well, but knowing in the partnership with Dean wasn't formalized, if you will, to the degree that we've been able to develop here.
So when there's a late bus going home, how are the parents notified? Was there a new system developed in terms of text messages or outgoing mass calls? What's actually happening now relative to before?
Yep, so now center-based supervisors, we actually get a text from the transportation supervisor, but then their dispatch, so their drivers call into central dispatch at Dean, and then they make a call to the parents.
So then they have a system, that blasts it out to all 10 parents or 5 parents or 20 parents. They just do one by one.
Individual calls, because typically on average bus size, if you will, students on the bus can be anywhere from minimum 6 up to say 12.
Okay, so it's not a massive burden to call. Okay.
No, it's that personal touch and that, I guess that relationship building with our families as well.
So regarding the communication, from the moment that the behavior write-up is made and it is put in the system, what is the turnaround time in minutes or hours or days that a parent's notified?
Good question. Nick, can you click on that artifact again? Because we did define that. Go back to the behavior, right there. So immediate action, right? If it's a major, where it's a crisis response, and if 911 is needed, that's, again, Dean's taking not just that risk, but identifying the need for that intervention. They're making that contact with the parent, sounds like immediately, right? As well as contacting center-based supervisors. When we look at the follow-up documentation under that right-hand column, under major behavior, the driver completes the incident report once he or she gets back to the bus garage, so it's that morning or that night, depending on the route, time of day. And then dispatch sends the incident report immediately to the center-based secretary via email, which then gets to that respective teacher or case manager. So it's within 24 hours is
The parent?
shared. And then
I guess my question is more on
for
the
the
parent.
document. Yes. So our practice at Oak Park is part of our data reviews. We do caseload reviews every 2 weeks. But again, if it's a major event, we're making contact with that parent immediately as well.
So-
Supervisors.
You as a staff is making contact, not,
Well, they make the initial.
yes.
So once we get the report, it helps us understand and gather more information if necessary.
What about other children that are involved or witnessed it, especially with children that have trauma and triggers? Is the bystanders being contacted also?
It's another great question, and I have not had that experience from Oak Park's perspective. As I reflect on some of the conversations from our colleagues at other centers, I know they're very mindful of that as well. I think they do take that opportunity either to debrief with the parent present, right? And working with that child, depending on their communication needs and how we access that to help process what happened. So I know as a team, they would certainly one, respond, but also be thoughtful in that response and really structure a safe place, if you will, to help them with processing what happened.
I think I, as a parent, always want to know what's coming in on the door, from the bus. And so when we are able to communicate in a very timely fashion to those parents, because those triggers are going to happen automatically. So if you're waiting a couple days to talk to the parents and, debrief, I already have a child at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that's now showing that behavior. So whatever we can do to assist that, I think will be greatly appreciated by many parents in the state.
Yeah, you kind of also mentioned, the experience of maybe not your son or daughter, but witnessing something.
Yeah.
And the challenge that creates for us is trying to protect the individual that's experiencing the inappropriate behavior or the behavior. Not putting judgment on it and making sure that we try to honor their privacy as well. And so that's the challenge around communicating not directly with the parent, but without question, I think, to your point, if there's significant behavior that occurs on the bus, the sooner the parent can know about it, the better.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a two-way street, right? I mean, it seems like that get off the bus, that they're having a reaction to it. The parent has to provide feedback back to the school in order for them to be briefed to even be able to react to it. How else would they even know about it? So it almost feels like a two-way communication on that is pretty critical. Otherwise, you're flying somewhat blind. You have to debrief first. That takes time. In the meantime, the parents already dealt with it.
And sometimes it's as simple as just a call saying, there was an incident on the bus, your child was not involved, but I just want you to be aware.
Right.
Just like that. And then you're like, okay.
So at least you're prepared.
You're prepared that there could be behaviors that are going to present themselves. And then that way, I never said that word right, is completely protected. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great feedback. And I think the committee appreciates that perspective too. I think some of it depends on how the driver identifies as a significant behavior. I think sometimes they
norms good.
Exactly. So, but definitely appreciate that.
And I appreciate you guys putting this together. This is well needed.
And if I can just offer one other, it's a strategy that we've been exploring and putting into practice at Oak Park. It's called Handle with Care. And so when I look at it from that lens, it's a strategy to adults in their care, whether it's at Bean or even with Oak Park staff that we're piloting. And it's simply just that, to build awareness, but have empathy, right? Awareness and progress monitor and watch their affect as well as how they're going to respond. Because sometimes if it's very traumatic, it may not manifest in that first day, first week. It may be months or even another
trigger happens and it brings it up.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark and Sean. I really appreciate your work and your committee's work. We're going to move on to promoting a positive work climate and culture that builds on the values of our organization and supports all team members. And we have Corey Ann Street and Caitlin Larrabee, who are in the staging area. Here they come.
Hi everybody, I'm Caitlin. I'm a school psychologist. I serve schools in TCAPS.
I'm Corianne Street, teacher consultant, and I serve as Glenlake Community Schools, Buckley Community Schools, the secondary GTAC schools, Greenspire, and the Lima School.
So really, as you see on the slide, if you remember, I know we presented to you guys a few times now, but really with promoting a positive work climate and culture, it's a big construct. So when we went in, we're like, gosh, where do we focus? And a lot of our data did show that staff generally do feel that we have a fairly positive culture going into the survey of 2019. So that was a great place to start. So we really tried to prioritize areas that we felt like we could target pretty efficiently and make a measurable impact over time. So we focused on, this is pre-pandemic, we identified health and wellness, social connection, and staff recognition as our 3 priority areas. And so it's kind of funny that health and wellness was a pre-pandemic consideration. So we had a group within our committee that was focusing on that. Shutdown occurred, came back, and then a lot of initiatives with responding to COVID involved like health and wellness for your staff. So another committee also formed, kind of not realizing that we had a group working on the same thing. So those groups have merged and are still working on priorities related to that work, but really like activities for staff, information, and other events, especially as we start doing more things in person, is the plan in that realm. Social connection is like the really tricky one in a pandemic to address. So our group was really wanting to focus on in-person events available for all staff, like 4 times a year, like quarterly. Still definitely a long-term goal, but at this time really was not feasible to focus on that. But they have decided to really merge with health and wellness. So social is a dimension of health and wellness. It's in like that little circle that you can see. It is one of the 8 dimensions of health and wellness that we've adapted at our organization. So that is really, hopefully they can work in collaboration on those goals.
All right, and our third area that we prioritized was having a staff recognition system. So we've shared this with you before, and really the intent was to develop a system that promotes a culture and celebrates accomplishment. So kind of an informal system all the way through a formal recognition. So that was really the main goal of that, to just increase that sense of belonging and feeling accomplished. So our goal was to launch it right after spring break, and we successfully met that goal. So we kicked off April 6th with an all-staff preview in the weekly wellness blast. And then on April 7th, there was a separate email sent out just specifically introducing the staff recognition system. So a video was created that just kind of introduced the Sailor system as well as how to access the recognition forms. So those things are all live. We have live links on our portal to access our Sailor's recognition system. And then we also have a staff intranet page for staff recognition. So all of the forms are located in those areas for our staff to utilize. We've also created a nomination form with eligibility criteria for the Standard School Award. So that's also available. And again, everything in the system is linked to our mission, vision, and values. So we wanted to update you guys since our system has been up and running for about a little over a month now. We wanted to share with you some data of people that have been using our system. So that's on the next slide.
Yeah, and so that printout that I think you have the colored one, kind of all the charts and fancy things. So that comes from the dashboard. So this is, I'm a novice in this area. So there's this tool called the Google Data Studio. So if it's a Google form, so if you used a Google form, that's what the Sailor's form is. It's just a Google form that staff can access. It's linked to it, funnels into this dashboard, which is updated constantly as submissions come in, which is great. And then you can of course adjust so when we looked at for April to pick the Sailors on deck for Signia, we adjusted for who submitted in April. There's a random number generator built in, use that to then pick the submission that was linked to that number to choose that person randomly to be recognized at the board meeting and then check it out newsletter as well. So it's been fun to watch. It's a lot visually to look at it. I think when it's tiny, it's sort of like, what am I looking at here? But what's exciting is, so even since I ran that for you guys, it's been a little over a week now. I think, so your total, I think is around 80 submissions and now we're up to 105 even from when I printed it today, which is exciting. So people are using it. And we've had 42 recognizers, people that were giving the recognition, and then 79 people who have received the recognition. So it's working. It hasn't crashed yet. That was my worst. I didn't know if it was going to keep working, but it appears to still be up and running and going smoothly so far. So I think Corey and I were saying today, it's kind of like a soft launch. I feel like with this year, a lot has been put on people, and the technology piece is just a lot, for people to manage. So I think reintroducing it next year, reminding people about how to use it, and just making sure that people feel comfortable and understand. But so far, so good.
And on the next slide, an additional component of the dashboard system is it just highlights the breakdown of all of the values recognized. So it's just showing so far, and this again was just that month of April, that excellence was the value that was recognized the most at 31%, followed by relationships, then service, students learning first, listening, and then tied diversity and integrity, and then the last was empathy and equity. So this is just kind of a breakdown of the values that are tied to all of those submissions that Caitlin just reviewed. So again, this is just kind of a perk of the system. However, the main intent of it is really for just members all throughout our organization to have an opportunity to receive that informal feedback in a non-evaluative way, in addition to having an opportunity monthly for someone to be recognized and shared and then check it out, and an opportunity to be shared with the board. So all of our goals are completed and to be continued. You have any questions at all?
So staff will be kind of reminded to be thinking about this monthly.
Yeah.
It's time to be thinking about this and get it done and.
Yes, so in the month of April and the month of May, in the Check It Out newsletter, there's been a section related to the staff recognition system with the live links embedded in there, so people have an opportunity to see that monthly as well.
Another nice thing too is when you receive feedback yourself, there's a link at the bottom to kind of prompt you like, oh, keep the positivity rolling, like it's your turn to recognize someone, so it also kind of uses that to keep it going.
I have a question if nobody else is going to go. I think this looks beautiful. I absolutely love it. One of my questions, and maybe you touched on it or are thinking about it, is going back to the health and wellness piece of it. That was a couple of slides back. Have you thought about potentially doing like a pre and a post survey? So a pre-survey asking staff how they're feeling, their mental health, their wellness. Do they feel supported by their administration and their leadership? Is that any thoughts that might fit into this?
Yeah, so there have been multiple surveys this year. So really, Julie Gordon and Lee Kennedy, who are spearheading the Health and Wellness Committee that developed out of the COVID response, they have been collecting data at least 3 times. I have filled them out because I've sent them out throughout the year with questions just like that. So I'm not sure if there'll be an end of year one as well or beginning of next year. That's a great thing to think about.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I have a mechanics question. So there's a live link, you click on it, and you're going where? You're going on a website? And how user-friendly is this website? I mean, if I were on my phone, would it be really simple for me to quickly post something if I wanted to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple different ways to access it. One is through our portal. So there's an icon on there that you can click and it just brings you to the Google form, similar to entering the building, how you have to submit the screening. So it's just like that. So you can do it from the phone or from the computer. And then our staff intranet is where the other link is formed to access that Google form. So it can be done in either of those 2 areas. And
But this dashboard.
oh, the dashboard.
Those are good answers, but
Yeah.
I know the dashboard. I'm moving on to
So
the next thing.
the dashboard is, right now, it's just within the staff recognition committee that has access to that, but we can certainly, we're open to sharing it. But I think the intent was, again, just this was more of the informal recognition piece.
Right.
So not necessarily to be highlighted or shared with everyone throughout the organization.
Okay, I mean, I mentioned this before, I think, I can't remember, it's been a long year. But for me, it just feels like this is screening to have a private Facebook page, like a Facebook group, which they've invented. It'd be administrators that are the committee members, and then people would be automatically members when they're an ISD or a North Ed employee. And then there's pictures and videos and the event, people can post positive comments about an employee and you get notifications via your Facebook page, account. And it feels like it's just the mechanics of it are just integrated in with people's normal social networking. But it'd be private. You can't be a member unless you're a North Ed employee. So because it feels like just like accessing a Google form, there's not a lot of like pizzazz or feedback there. It's just more like I'm just throwing something out on a form. And then I'm waiting around to see it possibly show up somewhere in a newsletter. It just feels a little bit more social, like it kind of feeds into the social aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's.
But I brought it up before, and you can ignore me. I just want to make sure if I'm repeating myself, ignore it. But it feels like it's just screaming for something that like a Facebook private group.
With just employees.
Has anyone been involved in a Facebook private group? What I'm saying, does it make some sense?
It makes sense. And actually, to your point, the company that we kind of base this on is called Achievers, and that's who Hagerty uses. They have their own internal kind of almost Facebook page. It's not through Facebook, but it's done through there. So that's something that we could certainly explore and talk to the communications team about. It would be interesting to do a survey to see how many of our employees are utilizing Facebook and have a Facebook account. I know several of us haven't in the past, but if that's something that even if just the ones that have it could use, we're certainly open to that to see if that's something that.
Because it feels a little like you could then integrate the wellness aspect and the social aspect, because you could have even somebody who's interested in having a tennis group or a bowling group or something. You could actually have an ability to broadcast out that we're doing some sort of a subset event of people who like you running, and so it'd be something that people see all the time in their life.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think right now what's fulfilling that purpose is the Check It Out. It has those announcements, the winter challenges, the things that we've done and the weekly wellness class. But that might be one opportunity to kind of put it all in one centralized location for people to access and allow for notifications. And I think, especially for the Sailor on Deck, that monthly recognition, that might be another avenue to kind of highlight that.
It wouldn't be public, it'd be private behind sort of a wall. But
sure.
Anyway, those are just ideas. They're not great ideas necessarily. They're just ideas. So
no, they're
take them and
great
throw
ideas.
them away if you want to. Those are
We
fine.
can certainly collect more feedback and talk to our communications department about that as well.
Thank you both for your leadership. You've been working tirelessly the last couple of years, and we really do appreciate the attention to climate and culture. It's everything. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to discuss safety protocols and training, both internally and externally. And we have Tim Vandermeulen and Melinda Gardner. Hi, Melinda.
I'm Melinda Gardner. I'm a school psychologist, and I'm here, one of the co-chairs of our sales safety committee, and I'm here with Tim Vandermeulen today. So we're going to walk you through kind of where we're at, state of the state. So our primary goal was to assess the policies, protocols, and safety plans for each of our buildings, our Northwest Ed service sites. And so what we looked at was that there is certainly a need for training around developing safety and crisis team rules and responsibilities at each site. And so we selected to move forward with the Prepare training, and that is a comprehensive school preparedness and crisis response curriculum that was developed by the National Association of School Psychologists. And this curriculum is designed specifically for school-based employees. And so we were able to offer our first round of training back in April. We did 2 after-school trainings because we all know sub shortages are quite an issue right now. So I just have to give kudos to all of the folks that attended that training because it did take up some of their personal time. So we were able to complete that. And I say first round because I do want to acknowledge that that will likely be a training we would like to repeat in the next couple of years, just for staff that we may have missed or new folks coming on. So then the collaboration with our programs that house our North Ed students. So what we did was worked with each of our sites to have them identify safety and crisis team members that would serve on their teams to work on completing the annexes of our organization's emergency operation plan. And so moving forward, those teams will continue that work into next year. Having just gone through that initial training, that work is obviously going to continue. And then those annexes will become part of our organization's full emergency operations plan. And that will be a document that needs to be updated at least annually, if not more frequently. And so one item that we'd like to offer is that next year we have quarterly meetings scheduled with a safety leadership team that will be responsible for ensuring that that EOP is continued to be worked on and updated, like I said, at least annually. And then that last objective, just looking at engaging in those tabletop exercises and drills, that's a pretty important component of establishing those emergency operation plans. And so what we're going to do also is allow or have those scheduled prior to the next school year. So we want them to at least happen at least 4 times a year, if not more, and those will be supported by the leadership team, the safety leadership team into next year. So I think I hit everything. Yeah, any questions?
I'm curious about the coordination with local districts and does our plan match up with theirs, and has there been like discussion to coordinate?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we have, I think currently 9, 10 certified Prepare trainers in our organization. So I think I mentioned that at our last board meeting. It's a huge point of pride for us. And so we do really have the capacity to start expanding out to offer those trainings to our local districts. Prepare is currently in its 3rd edition of being updated. And so when it came, trying to remember now, it's the years are starting to run together. I think it was about 6 years ago when a group of us had originally gone through the training. And we actually had a lot of momentum originally when we started first offering. So many of the districts actually have gone through this training in some capacity. We just haven't had this, been able to kind of keep up with it and maintain that momentum. So I'm hoping with the update and some of these pieces that we'll be able to offer additional trainings to the district. For example, Kingsley, I think, is on the schedule actually right before we get back to school next year to do the first workshop. So the TCAPS has also talked about wanting to do a training as well. So yeah, absolutely. All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Tim and Melinda. Really appreciate that.
Of course, thank you.
Next, we have Tom Mills and Jennifer Stairs and Heather and Ryan. They're going to just review where we're at with our common understanding of our identity and brand.
So I'll just quickly talk about phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, we first did a lot of research and looked at the broad picture of who we are as an ISD, what we do, and how we were known in the community. That led us to do some more research on how to rebrand this large of an organization, and eventually led to a call for proposals, at which point then we finally hired Nielsen Design Group to go ahead and begin designing the new brand. So we were completed with all of those things in phase 1. In phase 2, then we started working on a weekly basis with Emily Nielsen and Nielsen Design Group to begin that soft rollout. And that has also been completed. We have begun the process of rolling out the new brand, and it has been rolled out internally. And the thing that we're still working on is that whole launch on opening day this fall. And I'll let Heather take on from where we're going from there.
We did not plan this.
No, we did not.
I'm filling in for Tom. Tom and Jennifer have done an outstanding job in co-chairing this rebranding project. And I will follow up, just giving you insight on this ongoing work that we're doing with the rebranding as we continue to move forward. There's a lot going on the back end of production line, specifically with technology. We have network systems changing, removing all reference to TBA ISD within our framework, within files, within applications and platforms. So that's ongoing in the background with the support of technology services. We have a domain name change that's coming up, and that will occur on June 21st. We will be changing the tbaisd.org to northwested.org, and that will also reflect a change in our email addresses as well. So that is all occurring on the back end with the support of technology again. We continue to build the content on our website in this transitional period where we are creating communication tools and resources on our staff intranet. And that is a secure side of our internet so that we can keep communicating with our staff with the transitional pieces that they can support and advocate as we continue to move forward. We like to communicate with our staff first, keep them informed, answer their questions, and support the transition along the way. And the latest updates will always be posted on the staff intranet. So throughout the summer, we're encouraging everybody to stay tuned because there's going to be a lot going on. The work with Nielsen Design Group is ongoing with the design aspects of our brand. They're helping us look at the brand as a system. So we have to look at the organization as a whole and look at the organizational chart and make sure that we're moving forward with clarity. The whole purpose of the rebranding in the first place is to create clarity behind our name and what we do. So we continue to look at that org chart and make tweaks along the way. We are going through some renaming scenarios with some of our programs because we have examples like Oak Park and Traverse Heights that live in the entity of TCAPS and cause that confusion out in the community in regard to whether it's a TCAPS program or a Northwest Education Services program. So that brings us into our org chart to look at that, to look at the naming structure. And we're in that process, which we'll keep you informed along the way, of some potential name changes, using words that create clarity in what we do. See, the design of the system with the brand will help each department shine. So Nielsen Design Group is working on that department signature so that all our departments have a reference point to who they are and they can shine by using that system identity, using the logo and a name that gives them recognition as the department that they are. And in the interim, we're working on transitional formats. So we're updating documents, we're updating email signatures, and we're doing that in transition using the formerly TVA ISD so that people can recognize us in transition. The Nielsen Design Group will help us move that transition through using those interim signatures and those interim letterheads that identify the transition, but they are also designing that final logo signature at the same time. So that's the work that they're doing on the back end, not just the interim basis, but the final letterheads and the final signatures and using that logo and that brand recognition. To date, we've done an interim email signature and we've created interim letterhead. We have newsletter templates and mastheads that they're working on. So to check it out, we'll have its own new masthead, which should build that brand identity and give a new look to the face of our communication. Internal documents will transition over the summertime. We have many documents on our website that have typically used our letterhead as a header. Now we have a new designed header and footer designed to be used within those documents, and we'll have staff supporting that transition and updating all those documents and forms that is on our website. We are also in the process of new signage, talking about what that looks like and phasing that out into different buckets so that we don't overwhelm ourselves with too much too fast. We're looking at those priority signs that are on corridors, highways, or roadways that are seen most frequently, and looking at that budget aspect of what that will look like long-term and how we can break that up into smaller parts. And then we're also preparing for opening day, September 1st. There's a lot to do between now and then to make sure that we shine. So we are working with Nielsen Design Group to prepare for that with branded swag and logos at every turn when you walk into the building. We hope that people will really recognize that there's been some work that has occurred over the summer and they can be proud about that brand. In the end, a standards guide will be provided by Nielsen Design Group, and that will help our staff, all of you, everybody be advocates for our new brand and support and recognize the Northwest Education Services. A lot of work in the background, a lot of people helping out, and it's really exciting. Does anybody have any questions?
Are you gonna do the buses are gonna have the name or anything? What do you think of that?
The buses we haven't tackled yet. But it is a part of the picture. We have just begun the conversation on signage. We've taken photos of everything that we see, but we see it every day. So it's a matter of bringing some people in that don't walk into our buildings all the time, and they may recognize something that needs to change that we just walk by without seeing that. So it's a new conversation that we're having, and we'll be making some big progress over the summer with some of those bigger, more visual pieces. And the parts and pieces will follow along the way.
Yeah, and we've also engaged Dean and our transportation consortium in some of those comments and wanted their feedback. Some of the feedback that we received specifically around brand identity and confusion is when we had TBA and ISD on the buses and they would be traveling into districts. At times it looked like TCAPs. And so there was oftentimes some phone calls that other superintendents would get. And we want to also provide Dean with the most flexibility to ensure that they're delivering on routes. And oftentimes we have buses that break down. And then we have a situation where we have to draw from another area. And so, we're really leaning probably more towards having those buses say Dean than having it be, about us. The other piece to that is, we want to make sure that individuals know that if there is something that isn't quite right with the route or something like that, that our parents, we want them to contact Dean because they're the ones that can most quickly resolve the issue rather than maybe calling the school or calling us and then we have to call Dean and it just delays the process. So a lot to think about with respect to buses and brand identity.
I have a couple of questions. One is and you may have misspoke, but you might not have. You mentioned the name change of the website. Did you say Northwest Ed dot?
We did,
You
yes.
didn't go with North Ed.
No, we did not. We had done some research on all of that and determined that the best step forward would be to utilize more of our formal name, Northwest, instead of the nickname North Ed. The research proved that that was a better step forward.
Okay, very surprising.
There's a big
Research.
story behind it.
Okay, big story. Don't need to hear it. The second thing is I have it's not an OCD, but you all might think I have a few OCDs. But one thing that's just bugging me is I go onto Facebook, which I rarely ever do. I want to talk about it twice now. On Facebook, the name the North Ed logo showed up like a few weeks ago. And I can't stand that it's not sized properly and it's chopped off on the edges. Can we have Emily Mitchell on her team just design something that actually fits?
I can fix that.
You can fix it, okay. Because it's such a great logo and I just don't like it that the circle chops off pieces of the wonderful signature that we've got. So
That's a very good point. We're in the interim stages, and as we bring the logo into certain situations, we do find that we do have to adjust. So
yeah, it's not doesn't fit a circle perfectly, but it just has to be shrunken down, I think, a little to make it all, because that nice little carrot on the top and the E and the deal.
Yeah, great point.
Anyway, I love it. I've always loved this, the way that this has been coming together. But northwested.org. Jeez, that's going to be hard. Well, because I want to say North Ed. Like I always want to say North Ed.
And you should.
Except for when I have to say go to northwested.org.
Yeah.
Can't believe the data showing that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just pause and, we're halfway through and you've already seen an immense amount of transition that has taken place. The direction around our strategic plan, very clearly defined goals. And this is one that really going into it, we really didn't know how significant a change we were going to let the data and the research lead us. And just a huge shout out to Jennifer and to Tom and to Heather and the team. I know Heidi was very much involved with it too, but they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this one. And there's work to be done, but really a lot to be celebrated and accomplished too. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, we're going to continue and we're going to have Erin Ryan and Jenna
Hasida.
Hasida. I practiced it too. Their goal was explore, assess, and identify regional programming needs and or gaps across the continuum. So thank you so much.
So I'm Erin Ryan. I'm a teacher consultant for the Southwest region. I serve Benzie Elementaries in pre-K and then also Silver Lake Elementary here in Traverse City. Yes, our goal was big. Explore, assess, and identify regional programming needs and or gaps across the continuum. It's quite a mouthful, and there was a lot that we had to do to break it down. Essentially, we needed to figure out what was available currently, what the needs are, and then what barriers exist so that we can continue supporting our locals across the region.
Good afternoon, I'm Jan Siva and I work at Kirkland. As Erin said, this was a very big goal and we wanted to break it up into manageable parts. We worked with a great team and we decided to narrow our focus on general education, special education, English learners, and early childhood. And each team was tasked with creating a survey to gather information about content area, social emotional learning, or gathering perception data. And then each team decided and looked carefully at the timing of the surveys, the context, and the stakeholders. Surveys were sent out staggered timing. Potentially some stakeholders were going to receive multiple surveys and we wanted to be time sensitive of that survey fatigue.
So in terms of what we've completed so far, our ultimate goal was to be able to provide to our administrators and our Board of Education what we call a gap analysis matrix. And we're going to show you some examples in a few minutes. That is complete. What we found from that is some really, really great things to celebrate. We also found that there are some areas of need that may or may not be focus areas for the future work for North Ed. So we did link in, if you happen to have a chance to go back to the PowerPoint, we did link in the goal sheet, which again, just kind of goes through the steps that we took and lets you know that we completed most of those things, but throughout the process, we really did realize that we had to shift focus a little bit. And you know, our job wasn't to fix the problem, which is what we want to do, but it was to just really lay it out and figure out where we're at right now. And so if you want to go back to the PowerPoint, Mr. Sigler, that'd be great. I'm going to take you guys into general education, which was the subcommittee that I worked with. I worked with Kim Urbanski and Amy Gagnon. And if you will click on the gen ed summary, that would be fantastic. So what we've done for each subcommittee is break down who was part of the survey, who was given the survey, and some of those highlights. So for the general education survey, we had K through 12 representatives across the region, with 12 out of our 16 public schools having responded. We did have 3 that did not report at all, and we had 1 of our public school academies respond to our survey. So again, we looked specifically at English language arts, mathematics, social emotional learning, and then just we wanted to get a general idea of the programs and services that schools were providing. So if you want to scroll down to the section where it says program and services, there we go. So this was kind of a huge celebration in my mind because all 12 of the districts who responded all reported that they are doing something beyond curriculum for kids. They're doing things that are interesting to them or things that they need to learn. So, you know, Teacher Academy, they have a child study process. They're working on disability or diversity awareness. So they have extracurricular things happening to help shape the whole child. So that was wonderful. On the chart, you can just kind of see the breakdown of the different areas where we highlighted programming. And I won't take up your time to go through each one of them, but it is there for your reference. So overall for general education, celebrations include, you know, the majority of the districts that we identified, they are using evidence-based ELA and mathematics curriculum. That means rigorous curriculum that is been through research and it is designed to help students make improvements. So that's wonderful news. All of the districts identified having a data review process, which is also really important for ELA and math. So looking at our data and saying, is it working? Is it not? And what do we do next? 94% of our districts indicated that they have adopted a social emotional learning curriculum. That's huge, especially within the last year. And then we also were able to identify that all districts have a plethora of tier 2 interventions in place for ELA and math and for social emotional learning. So again, as we move forward in the next phase, certainly just suggestions, but we were able to really see a glaring need for further communication with our locals on the role of an itinerant and the role of our instructional services team, which I know is already kind of in the works. Taking a better and closer look at how the multi-tiered systems of support is implemented in our school districts, diversity and equity awareness, potential health services, and then talented and gifted programming. Those were sort of the areas of most need for general education.
Okay. Special Education Committee sent a surveys to all the special ed case managers and then administrators for K through 12 grades across the region. We received input from all grade levels and a representative from each LEA, and totaling 70 responses. So we were thrilled with all of that feedback that we received. Surveys provided us an opportunity to hone in our understanding of the diverse needs of all the districts. And we looked specifically at special education programs and services, specially designed instruction, transition, social emotional learning, and behavior supports. Overall arching themes from the survey were LEAs are open to regional programming like SEL. A wide variety of interventions are being used at tier 1 and tier 2. 91% of respondents shared they are implementing some form of behavior support. And looking at suggested focus areas for phase 3, the subcommittee would like to develop an invite list to expand subcommittee and look at programming for students with mild cognitive impairments. Further information around interventions, and then positive behavior support.
Can I ask a quick question? Just what is a tier 2 intervention or tier 2 level support? You guys mentioned it twice now and I feel ignorant.
So if you were looking at an MTSS triangle, so Michigan's tiered systems of support, I think it's 90% of our kids are going to fall at this gen ed level. And then the tier 2 are those kids who may need some additional supports, still at the gen ed level, maybe getting some Title I services.
Got it.
And that top part of the triangle is where we have our highest need students.
Got it. Carol taught me that about 3-4 years ago, but I forgot it. I slept since then, as they say. Okay, good. Thank you for that.
One thing, I'm going to talk about the English learners, but I forgot to show you guys. Nick, can you, Mr. Segler, pardon me, can you click on one of the general education map, the matrix?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure you guys know, this is kind of the process that we went through. So each subcommittee went through and we had to identify each school district that responded and then all of the responses. So it was a lot of totaling and figuring, but at the end of the day, it is a reference tool that another group or whoever it might be that continues this work can go back to. And it's broken down, again, by the different categories, ELA, math, SEL, and then programs and services. So it gives you another reference tool to use as we continue our work. Thank you. English learners, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm so grateful to Deb Netto and Dre Weiner, who really focused in on English learners this year. They reported from their survey that most districts understand how to identify English learners, and they indicated that this is growth since they started focusing on English learners in 2013. Areas of need, our districts needing support with training and how to identify English learners and making sure that they're communicating with families in their home language. She indicated also there appears to be a disconnect in understanding between administration and teaching staff at the building level. Usually the administration has a strong understanding, but there's that breakdown where the staff doesn't have the training to be able to, easily assess those needs and then implement curriculum in an appropriate manner. So again, work to be done in this area, but English learners, we have this fantastic crew that works on this, and it's their specialty. And so they've been working on it for years and are making continued progress.
And the last subcommittee was early childhood. Again, lots of work has been done around this and just a lot of celebrations from the data that they collected. So they said had 37.5% of districts throughout the region offer more than one preschool program option. 100% of districts are utilizing Tier 1 curriculum, and 100% are utilizing Tier 1 curriculum with special ed services, and 100% are participating in multi-tiered system of supports. So a lot of great celebrations across the board.
We just want to give a shout out to our committee members. Jana, obviously, we were co-leading this and we kind of jumped in with blinders, but it's been a great experience. Mike Hartman, Matt Kikek, Kim Urbanski, Becky Goodwin, Sarah O'Brien, Drea Weiner, Tracy Fosdick, Amy Gagnon, and Deb Netto. They've been instrumental in our work as a crew. So we're excited to look for other professional opportunities to grow with them.
And I'd just like to, again, thank you for your leadership. When you go into something so broad like this, it's hard not to try to, solve all the issues that you come up with. But the idea is really to do a comprehensive assessment, which you clearly have, and then, what the next steps has is we'll be informed by the data that when we go through SAIL 2. So really appreciate your leadership on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a quick question. So I might be just a lot of information, so I might have glossed over a few things, but the gap analysis part of this, I mean, did we see a summary of really what gaps were actually identified? Or I only heard mild cognitive impairments, I heard possible English language gaps from administrators, teachers, but I guess I was listening, I think, and I just didn't hear like gaps.
So when you look at each summary, there's needs, for example, for special education. So there's a lot of perception data that's been gathered, and I think that would become what further suggested work is to dive into, okay, here are the gaps from the perception data that's been gathered in those targeted areas.
Okay.
This may be where you could further work to dive in.
Got it. So a lot of survey stuff just to get a feel for what people are identifying. Okay.
Yeah.
I got it.
And it's the same with general education, those 4 areas that we looked at. Of course, I want to shed the positive, right? But there are definitely some, when you get digging into the data, you're able to really see like, oh, okay, I see an area where I need to work further. Maybe this region needs this support. So it's definitely there. But I just want to be respectful of everyone's hard work this year. And so we're happy to help take it to the next level if we need to, but we appreciate the opportunity for sure.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, there's a risk in all of this, right? I mean, all of the survey goes out, all these people respond, they identify gaps. And then we at North Ed have to make sure that we have to loop back and actually help fill the gaps. I mean, with their collaboration, if it sort of peters off, it actually could be a net negative to have identified a gap and then ignored the solution side of it. But so what you're saying is the next SAIL 2.0 is taking a look at those gaps and then deciding what the priorities are and how we're going to achieve it.
Yeah, so I would say a couple of things. Number one, a gap that may be identified might be in perceptional level, right? So I think they found that a district might say, boy, we really would need some support with MTSS. And they just didn't know that we had that there, that they could access it.
Right.
So one, it's identifying that maybe misperceptions out there.
Yeah, yeah.
But number two, when we go through this process again, if the gaps that were not just perception get brought up again, then we take this data and we move it to the next level But what I think what we'll find is that just identifying what the perception of those gaps are and providing the necessary information to inform them, my suspicion is that when we go through this strategic planning process again, it may not be identified as a significant area of concern for us to focus on. It may be, and if that's the case, then we already have the groundwork that this committee's laid to move that forward.
Yeah, good. That makes sense.
I want to share an English learning story with you. My daughter is a teacher in Oakland, California. And she had been in one public school and now teaching another one. And out there, when they have student teacher or student parent conferences, the student comes with the parents to the student teacher conference. Well, when she started her year that year, she minored in Spanish. But she never spoke Spanish in a classroom and never acted as though she understood what was being said. And so classroom has a little Johnny, you've heard little Johnny jokes probably. But little Johnny came with his mother and father and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Carpenter, my parents don't understand English." So this young man had been a problem throughout the school year so far. My daughter turned to his parents and just started speaking to him in Spanish, and little Johnny's mouth just. And before class started the next day, everyone knew Miss Carpenter understood Spanish quite well.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
I'd like to introduce Lisa Klepper and Matt Nostatis, who will be talking about establishing meaningful partnerships with our local principals.
Hello, thanks for having us. Matt and I are here on behalf of all of our other committee members listed below. Truly a team effort. The team had unique perspectives and overall bolstered the capacity of the group to be able to move forward with the school. So when we looked at establishing meaningful partnerships with local principals, we initially utilized some data that was collected to inform SAIL phase 1, right? And then since then, lots of things had happened where our principals felt really supported, new things were put into place. And so this was an example of how we had to be flexible and to really pinpoint the areas that we were going to focus on. So we targeted 4 things for this go around. We needed to assess the current system of establishing partnerships and fostering relationships. And I'd also like to say in the time of COVID, because that is actually a key that will circle back around. We also decided that upon our assessing that there were different ways, different practices that were being implemented among the different groups. And so would there be a reason to create consistency with partnering with our LEA principal colleagues? Then we knew we needed to collaborate. We weren't just, we are the brain collaboration, but we knew we were going to have to get some help in making sure that how we partner, we were really promoting that robust content. So it was twofold. How are we getting our leaders the support they need to develop their skills? And how do we create meaningful partnerships in relationships, not only with North Ed, but with each other, because they're each other's support system, right? And then the last objective we had was working on establishing a best practice professional development opportunity for all regional principals to come together, like this huge convergence. Because what we found were a lot of the principals are kind of in silos, right? They don't have colleagues in the building. Like teachers have colleagues, TAs have colleagues in the building, and principals don't, just by the inherent structure of the school. So with those 4 objectives in mind, we can created some action plans. I've never used a Clipper before. This is really exciting. I did it. So just to give some more information about the objectives that we did, the first thing we had to do was we had to figure out a state of the state, right? Like, where are we? It's COVID. What do our principals in the region need? How can we support them? So we did a couple of different things. We completed 2 surveys with the principals, and I think our sample size was 32 which was pretty big considering the other taxing things they have on their agenda. So we got some good information about that. And we also, Matt and I participated in all of the elementary, the middle school, and the secondary principal meetings that happened regularly. So the outcome of those two things, we found that the principals, despite their crazy busy schedules, despite everything else on their plate, super interested and super committed to figuring out a structure to continue that support. And I do think this is where COVID comes back around. It was a crazy year with lots of different things to problem solve. Like, do we have prom? What does graduation look like? All of those sorts of things. Not to mention, like, how do we implement continuity of learning plans for our kids with special ed services? And it was just, we found just vast need for that strengthening of those relationships. So we saw that 85% of the principals surveyed were authentically interested in building these strong relationships. That's pretty powerful. And if we operationally define authentically interested, it meant that they were willing to commit to a time to meet with representatives from our committee and with each other. Like, even though everything else was going on, this was super important. So once we knew that there was value, they saw value in that, and it's something they wanted to pursue, then we went to our next objectives, was figuring out how can we make this happen for them. So part of our data came from our participation in the principals meetings that were currently existing in their structure. And what we did is we went in with an eye of, okay, so what's working? What can we generalize? What can we transfer? What can we bolster? And we found a couple of different things that we are working to move forward with. And one of the things was that consistency and structure across the grade levels, right? Even though elementary has very specific needs compared to high school, there's a template we identified that would benefit all. And so part of that is that structure and being able to articulate the necessary components of the agenda template. So this is what we've landed on, right? That the principals want a regular meeting, whether it's 2 times a month, 1 time a month. They want to know that they can depend on this time. They are really interested in important information and updates that are happening, whether it's state assessment, whether it's new special ed law, whether it is, what am I trying to say here? You don't even know. Read my mind, please.
Anything. It could be a million different topics.
AP classes, that's basically.
Yeah.
Like, how are they scheduling their AP classes? Like, all of these needs. And then lastly, they found so much benefit in just being able, we have it in quotes, a roundtable discussion. And that is really a forum for them to have a safe environment, a judgment-free zone to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What are you doing in Mansalona? Or CCAPS, you have 500,000 million kids. How are you guys working through this problem? Just a chance for them to connect on a personal level around the work that they're doing. So Matt is actually going to now share some of the survey data we received from the principals, and then he's going to continue on with where we're at in our work.
Yeah, I want to talk about 2 points before I transition from a couple of the bullets up here. Prior to coming to TBA North Ed, I was high school principal in Kingsley, and Kingsley is part of the Northwest Conference. So as a principal, I would go and have luncheons and meetings and curriculum agenda meetings and everything like that involved leadership with Northwest Conference leaders. So that was kind of my posse of people that I got to know and fostered meaningful relationships with. Then you fast forward and I come to the ISD, and now all of a sudden there's a 5-county area of administrators, most of which I didn't know. And I remember talking to Pat Lamb about, wow, we're a bunch of silos. This is really unique. And a lot of it's organic. You take a district like Traverse City Area Public Schools that has 10,000 students, and those administrators don't have time to foster relationships with someone in Kingsley and Mansalona. And that's just That's kind of the nature of the beast. So unless you give them a platform to do that, it doesn't happen. So my second point is COVID created an opportunity for that. Actually, it began organically about a year before. And I remember sitting in principal meetings with Pat, and we would wonder, and we would go back and forth about how do we get West and Central and other principals here to create a more robust content with big issues with, you know, small city schools, because we all are facing the same problems, but there was this dichotomy of feeling small versus someone else having completely different issues because, oh, they're a big school. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. We're all facing the same things. So here we are, we're in COVID, and I remember sitting at my kitchen table, and Pat, I think you were in your bedroom for half those meetings. It was just a very unique environment. And we were all bailing water with the same buckets out of the same boats, and we realized it, right? There was this aha moment with every secondary principal in the region within these meetings, and we were just like, wow, this is, we created this relationship that has grown to be quite strong. And it's special because it took a long time to get to that point. My point in saying all that is if we can do that and we were able to get that to the success rate that we have right now, everybody should do that. And it's not going to happen unless we give a platform to do it. It's just not. I keep thinking of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. So we're going to build it. So I want to go to the first and second bullet up there. So to do this, we really had to participate and find out, like go and see, right? Part of lean training is go and see, go and see. So we needed to go and see. So myself and Lisa and Pat, we went to these meetings. We've been participating in the high school ones. We're familiar with that. We needed to go to dabble and get a sampling of the middle school, get a sampling of the elementary, and see what it was all about, and just get a picture of, okay, how much of this needs to be changed? How does it need to be changed? What do we want to do? And then I came to the survey, and we sent a survey out, really just looking to get data. So this slide talks about the survey. And the very first question that we've already touched upon is, it's really simple. I'm authentically interested in building stronger relationships with peers, right? Building collegiality. And the green arrow up there is really, I put it up there to highlight that by and large, a huge sampling of them answered yes. I mean, it's very clear they want to build and foster relationships with each other. So, okay, so we're off to a good start with this survey. Had it been the other way, I would have been concerned. But then I asked a few more questions to find out, okay, what do they want to learn about as colleagues? If we were going to do this kind of kickoff type thing and bring all the principals together, probably elementary principals in one group, middle and high in another group, and put some training together and have that be the platform of which to put our kind of sale flag in and say, this is why we're doing this. It isn't just great that we're all together. Imagine if we could keep doing this. So we have NWA breakdown. We have a presentation from an MASSP lobbyist who would talk about public education and the hot topics. SEL, which is social emotional needs. And then on the next one, a speaker discussing the ins and outs of leadership, right? And that could be anything on leadership, educational leadership, political leadership, all of that. Maybe a mixed bag of everything. And then the two with the red stars are the ones that, the early sampling, right? These are early samplings. I'm hoping to get the sample over 60, and this is still open. This is a live survey and went out to every administrator in our region. So I'm hoping to get this number higher. I needed to pull it for the purposes of this presentation. The two that went out are presentation on new research and impactful instruction on student learning. So there's a lot of new data out there that has come to light as a result of COVID, as a result of distance learning, social emotional needs. So we're going to partner with IST and Paul Bauer and his team and try to get the most dynamic speaker on that and find out what people want to learn about that. And then an update from Truman Law Firm on just the hot topics in education, which they're constantly coming. So those are the two topics that we will begin planning for what comes next. So we're collaborating with instructional support. We're kind of surveying them to find out what additional supports they can offer for all of this. We're going to begin to organize the presentation, and keep in mind, we're going to have that presentation focus on those two things. Unless the survey goes the opposite way, we're going to have those two things. And our idea for this best practice PD kickoff, in order to bring the principals together, we're targeting August 2021, because in the educational world, principals typically stay 2 weeks after students leave, and they report 2 weeks prior. That's typical. So it's very difficult in an academic calendar year to find that perfect window. And Lisa and I were thinking that might be it. That might be it right there, because while there's a lot to do, that's the perfect time. So we're looking at that, and we're going to begin planning this meeting, and we're going to host it. And we're going to have those two topics, hopefully an update from Troon, and we're going to have some academic speakers speaking on the new research that they can bring into their schools. Now, moving forward, this is obviously, this is not a conclusion to this. This isn't going to be something we're going to do for a year, and this certainly isn't done. I mean, Lisa and I are dedicated to seeing this through probably another year or two cycle to get it going, because the things, the systematic operational procedure things that need to happen is she's graciously volunteered to lead the principals group, the non-high school principals group, which is going to involve her administrative assistant.
The elementary.
Yes.
Barely secondary folks. Elementary.
So her admin assistant will send out a reminder to the elementary group. Hey, what do you want on the agenda for the roundtable? What do you want to talk about? You know, what do you want this confidential first hour of the conversation to consist of?
Yep. And knowing, right, that first year is just about building capacity, building safety and trust, and then eventually shifting it to a model where then there's some internal leadership with the principals, right? Then someone else, let's say Leland's elementary principal, maybe we'll take a year where they're facilitating and planning with support from us. But just getting the structure and the routine down for them and supporting them in the process. Because it is one of those things they find value and they don't have time to get it off the ground. So that's what we're here for.
And then lastly, we have one last slide. Mr. Tank, I believe last time we presented via Zoom, you asked a good question about, hey, what happens when a new principal comes to the region? And that kind of sparked our interest to go find out and do our own research on, do we have that person? Do we have that liaison, the ambassador for Northwest Education or North Ed in any capacity to go out? And we talked to instructional services, and while they are doing some things, there's no one running out there right away, so to speak, welcoming them, giving them a packet of goodies and information on here's the resources that you need to know. So this is in progress. We're seeing this through, and we're going to make sure that we have the right people notified at the right time if that circumstance pops up. So I just wanted to update you on that. Great. Questions from anyone?
Yeah, I have one. Why do you guys keep using that NWES as an acronym for our organization name?
Just so TBA ISD wasn't up there?
No, the NWES, is that a violation of the branding?
It probably is.
Yeah, go talk to Emily Mitchell, she would yell at you for that. Number two, no, the second thing is there a lot of, the only thing that I see is kind of analogous to this is the Superintendents Association group, right? You're kind of mirroring that same idea within the principal subset. Did you guys steal any ideas of how the Superintendent Association operates and thinks about its collaboration and presentations that sort of mirror any of that, or vice versa?
Well, yes, absolutely. What we are doing is, as we are participating in all these different avenues, we're saying, oh, we're going to steal this. This is a really good practice. Oh, we're going to steal this from these people. So hopefully, right, that's the goal, is to find all the best practice, incorporate it into a routine that's systemic and has a template. So when Matt and I move on, he's going to Fiji, I'm going to Hawaii, someone else can continue this work in the same supportive form.
Yeah, I mean, you guys do some fun stuff together once in a while, right? Like, it used to be fun, at least years ago. I remember there was ideas of golfing or getting together and doing something recreational. Is that still happening, or is it all business the minute you got in charge?
Yeah, so, you know, one of the items that went away was the concept of a retreat / workshop.
Oh, that went away, yeah.
But in doing our work and developing our strategic plan and surveying our stakeholders and our constituents, the number one thing that the superintendent's commented that they wanted to get back was that networking and workshop / retreat. So over the last 2 years now, and I'm looking at maybe Carol, 3 years, we've reinstituted a workshop where we do dive deeper and spend more time on some really substantive issues, and then have some time for networking. And I think that's really important, especially this year. We just completed that, and I'll be providing you, as actually a part of my evaluation, some feedback forms and survey information from the words of the superintendents that we serve. So that type of activity, workshop / retreat might be something that
it's easier to do with your smaller group and you know, the principals are
We're
in a
already
different
working
world.
on kind of like a principal social to
Yeah.
wrap up the end of the year. So it is that networking piece and the different, more relaxed environment.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's great.
Great, thank you. Fantastic, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. We're gonna then turn things over to our communications goal. I have to get my cheat sheet. I know Julie Gordon is leading this work with Heather and Ryan Jarvie, so.
Right, thank you. So I'm Julie Gordon. I am the Special Education Compliance and Technical Assistant Supervisor and the Special Ed Supervisor for Kingsland.
I'm Ryan Jarvie, the Director of Communications here. Probably remember me from a couple months ago.
Right, and so one of our phase 2 goals was to develop a structure and system of effective communication. And Heather gave you the update in February. And in February, where we were at, we've confirmed our internal and external audiences. Back in 2017, there was a lot of information gathered around communication. So we reviewed that. And when we first started strategic planning, we had the big survey. So have used that information. What we found this year is a lot's changed since we did that survey. Like our culture and climate feels really different. Communication needs felt different as well. We have a wonderful committee of about 15 people who represent really all the different, many different departments, like special ed, communications. Amy Larson is pupil accounting. Colin O'Brien is a teacher at Career Tech. Jacqueline's in our business office, another service area supervisor, technology, administration, admin support, early childhood. Like we really worked hard to get a cross section. And so we've been using our group as kind of an internal think tank of how we see things. So internal, external audiences are complete. Our current state of who communicates and how we communicate is still in process. We've gathered lots of information from lots of different departments and are seeing where they align and where we could work at more alignment. Identifying strategies and supports. This was kind of what people and tools do we have. And one of our big accomplishments was hiring Ryan as our Director of Communications. If you'll remember, pre-pandemic, this was one of the positions that we were going to fill. And when the pandemic started, we paused on that. So that kind of pushed everything back a year. And some of our work this year was getting to the point of what more information do we want to gather? And now we're hiring someone. That someone that we're bringing on is going to have a say and have input into what information we still want to gather from our stakeholders. We have a shell structure of how we're going to support our implementation as we really hone in on what tools and processes we want to consistently use. And we're working on how are we going to check to make sure what we're doing is working. And so our next slide is kind of looking at what our next steps are.
Yeah, so Julie mentioned we did kind of complete that internal, external audience identification process. So we're kind of looking at the internal side of that. We started a survey just last week to kind of gauge, employee feedback on what kinds of tools do they like to use, what platforms are they comfortable with, do they want to get important messages through email or text message. So those sorts of things. And once we get that, that data set, we'll be able to kind of tailor our approach and modify what strategies we're using. And then also be able to kind of craft, employee policies or protocols that we can put in place. Whether that's asking employees to check their email once every 24 hours, or kind of directing them to the staff intranet over the website. It's kind of what we're looking at with that. So again, the timeline, we sort of sent that out last week. We'll be looking to kind of gather that info to mid-June, and then looking at late summer, early fall to kind of create those policies, protocols, and communicate that to staff. And external communications we'll look at in the fall and winter. We'll try to engage our stakeholders, so that probably the members of the media, local district superintendents, principals, administrators, parents and students, other community agencies and organizations that we would interact with. And again, really the goal is just trying to figure out how to best communicate with those groups. And in process, I think building relationships with them also. So that's kind of the target date, fall, winter, and then hopefully by winter, spring next year, we'll have a more comprehensive plan, be able to present those established consistent processes to our staff, to the community, follow those through however long we can. And then, once we have those set up, we'll work it into employee onboarding and training after we identify needs and experts on various platforms. And then again, that accountability piece, we'll have some sort of recurring survey of staff and community to see how we're doing. That's it for me. Any questions?
Good, thanks.
Thank you.
I'm gonna spare you by not asking.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that.
They're all looking at you. It's gonna
All right, next we have Yvonne and Sean that are going to talk about our facility needs. And they have been leading this group with the support of Linda.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for spending a little time with us learning about where we are in our sale process. I was really grateful to be paired by a sale expert such as Sean Biddle, who has brought her way through 2 goals already and now is looking at this facility needs. We had a great multi-sector collaboration around our committee members, including external stakeholders like Barry Manor from the Great Start Collaborative and GMB architect Jeff Hogue to support this process. As far as our scope, we really identified just 2 objectives that we were looking to work through in a very short scale. One was really to support the updated facilities study, which has already been completed, and then to find a way to capture data and stakeholder feedback around facilities for our organization moving forward. So that's been very much sort of a kept process, and it's as we were unfolding the layers, the idea of broad stakeholder feedback around what our distinct needs were became a really important part of what the process looked like.
So our committee started by reviewing the projects that were identified in the previous facility needs study. And we also heard about regional early childhood needs. And we just shared needs or shared our experience as committee members and identified based on where different committee members work and what buildings they're in and what their experience has been, kind of what they have seen as needs as well. So that was how we started in December and January. And then our next step was to survey district administrators on the needs that they and their staff identified. So we asked supervisors, we sent a survey out with some very specific questions, and we asked supervisors to work with their staff, gather data, and then submit that back to us in that survey form. And once we had those responses back, we sorted the data into categories based on the type of needs. So we came up with 5 needs. We had storage space, meeting space, instructional programming space, office space, and then mechanical and technical needs. So again, those were not categories that we identified as a committee. That's what came out of our analysis of those survey responses. So we then looked at all of the data and we identified what the next step would be for that request. So we had 4 different kind of potential next steps. One on large projects would be that those requests would need to go to the architect for inclusion in the facility needs study. The second possible step was items that could be completed over time using our organizational or our operational budget. So things that wouldn't necessarily need an architect that we could do with our in-house staff or at least pay for with our annual budget. We also had identified items that needed to go to the leadership team for further review. And those would be items that might be related to, there were lots of comments in the meeting space about working remotely. And so we thought really that needs to be a decision that's made by our leadership on what we're doing in that area. And then we also identified items that came to us from someone other than a supervisor. And we wanted to keep that information. And so we will, once we have identified our ongoing information gathering tool, we will include those items there so that they're not lost and will be reviewed annually.
So at that point, we took that group of recommendations that were going to the architect and really prioritized them into 1 to 3 year timeframes, 4 to 6 and 7 to 10. None of the data was lost or thrown out, as these were identified as organizational needs. So this wasn't a wish list or a dream list. Again, these were things that we need, both around health and safety requirements, as well as instructional best, right? Thinking about what it takes organizationally for us to be positioned in a facility to do the very best we can do for our students. Based on that, there were 4 high priority needs that were identified to move forward. Oak Park programming, transition central programming, new campus, the entrance and reconfiguration there, as well as early childhood programs. So those recommendations were shared with our ISD leadership team, and we've had some ongoing conversation around that. And they've now been shared with the architect. The final step, just as in our second objective that we just talked about, is really this opportunity, now that the data is collected, how we provide the infrastructure to continue to collect data from both our employees, the frontline staff, as well as leadership moving forward. So the process now becomes a 5-year review that's informed on an ongoing basis in regards to that data. So I'm glad to say that by June of 21 this year, this will be one of those SAIL committees that's wrapped up both objectives and will be completed with this piece of work. So open to questions or thoughts from the group.
Yeah, I have a question first. So when does the budgetary aspect of this flow through the board so we can actually see what the monetary aspects are?
Yeah, so any project that we are going, that is prioritized will go before the board in terms of approval from a budgetary perspective.
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess, yeah, I understand that, but there's a couple sources of money, right? There's the capital projects funds, but then there's also what is possibly left over within our operating budget and how we allocate that, whether that folds into the capital project side or is distributed out. I mean, So anyway, it's part of the budgetary process, which we're gonna hear about this in June, is that correct? Okay.
Thanks very much.
Great job, thank you very much. Next, we have two more, we're doing great, thank you for your attention. We have providing high quality relevant professional development, and Lee Kennedy and Ashley Troy.
Thank you, Dr. Support. Thanks, board, for giving us the opportunity to share some information with you around objectives completed. So Ashley, Troy, and I were the chairs for this group, and our overall goal was to provide high quality professional development to our region and our programs. And we completed the majority of our objectives, and we want to highlight some of the things for you within them. So the first thing was really creating a foundation around establishing a professional learning system using a research base. So we chose to use the research base coming from Learning Forward, which is a national organization that did research around what is the most effective types of adult learning and how to diversify that adult learning for your group. We utilized their 8 implementation steps and transformed them into our objectives for our group. So we followed that kind of research-based plan to improve your system, and we moved it into our committee work. So we created a vision, definition with standards, et cetera, and we will see, though that first bullet there will be kind of the new face of the landing page for the professional learning website page. So we'll be working with Heather Jewell and Heidi Argue to kind of redesign that landing page so that the vision and the definition are encapsulated there clearly.
The next objective was to look at internal and external survey data. So we had stakeholders from each of the discipline groups represented within our team, and then if they were able to reach in within their discipline groups to talk about which professional learning has been provided, and then also which professional learning opportunities would they like to be provided in the future. So that was our internal data set, and then we also had an external data set that also did actually include our internal stakeholders too, that went out to local administrators, teachers, and then our internal staff to look at what types of topics are people interested in for 2001 to 22 professional learning, what kind of setting do they want that in? So do they want to return to in-person if possible, or do they like the virtual presentations that they were able to access over the past year and a half? And also, when is the best time for people to participate in professional learning? So we were able to collect quite a bit of data to kind of help guide our next steps.
And that data is housed inside of a dashboard. So the survey data was imported into a dashboard and then put out in graphs. So we could basically see the region's requests and needs related to learning topics. And those are what populated then our plan for next year that we'll talk about in a minute. So the third bullet there, then designing a system of operations to improve processes within Unified Talent. Unified Talent is the platform or the system that we use where people go in and register for professional learning. They can go in there and log in and see what courses we have and things. So really, I want to give exceptional credit to Nikki Sheehan and Jenny Jesse, administrative assistants here for special education and general education. And their ability to create, they created a structured process for everyone who provides professional learning in the region. Like, what's the first step that you need to do? Then what's the second step? How do you get it into Unified Talent? How are you going to evaluate it? They created a shared Google folder or Google Drive, and then they provided training around that and held office hours for it. And they're going to kind of do that again in the fall for new staff turnovers. So thank you to them for that.
Our next objective is still in progress. Part of the Learning Forward's guidance was around looking at professional learning policies. And we connected with Matt Olson to get insights as to where our organization was at with that. He had shared that the board is looking at board policy come the fall. So we're going to wait for that to happen to then see where professional learning fits within the new policies to complete that objective. So that's in progress right now.
The next bullet is about around creating long-term and short-term plans to guide professional development, including evaluation. So when we think of a long-term plan, we're going to talk about in a minute a plan, do, check, adjust system that we would like to look at next year, because we did kind of create the system and now how are we going to monitor it. And then short-term plans to guide professional development. We took all of the survey data that Ashley was talking about, and we populated it, you'll see in the next slide, we populated it into our professional learning for next year. So if we didn't have a topic that was scored 3.8 or higher on a scale of 1 to 5 that someone in the region asked for, then we made sure that that was a part of our professional learning plan for next year. So our short and long-term plans is we have a live electronic professional learning flyer that will be ready to go out the first week in June to the entire region that's based on what their survey needs were. And then we have a long-term plan around looking at the success of the system that we've implemented.
And then our next objective really focused in on having an evaluation system for the professional learning that was occurring or is occurring within the organization. So we have 2 survey types. One is for just right away after the professional learning experience comes to a conclusion, participants get a survey to collect feedback on that. The second survey is sent out about 6 weeks later to see what has impact been directly on students and also on their professional practice. So we have kind of that immediate response accounted for, but then also how did that professional learning experience impact directly to students and or teacher practice specifically.
The next slide, there's the goal and objective template, and within that template, we hot linked every piece of evidence we would have for you around strategies and activities, should you want to look further. This next slide just highlights a couple of things. So remember earlier when I was saying there was an electronic professional learning guide that would be ready to go out to the region? That's what you see in the top left there with those little buttons, if you will, and all of them have topic areas like social emotional learning, positive behavior supports, early childhood. Those topics were the topics that rose to the top in the surveys from the discipline groups internally, as well as from the 170 some people that were part of the survey that we sent out to our districts. So that's how those topics were chosen. And then the dashboard down on the right, that's an example of, do you remember Ashley was saying that we're gonna have an immediate evaluation from the people that participated and then a 6-week one? What's gonna be really effective about that is we're gonna do the same thing we did with the survey data. We're gonna have data specialists imported into a live dashboard, and then that dashboard will be sent to the presenters right away so that they can see in graph form the learning and impact, and then it will be sent to them again 6 weeks later. And then Ashley and I and the professional learning committee will also be able to look at that, let's say quarterly next year as part of a plan, do, check, adjust. Like, are we really doing effectively what we said we were gonna do? Thank you. Questions?
So I would just like to, again, thank them for their leadership, but I want to point something out. So one of our goals we have as an organization is to really break down the silos between special education and general education. It's intentional that we have 2 amazing leaders here, one on the special education side and one on the general education side. And they've done a great job of really working together and trying to hit the needs, not just of our internal stakeholders on professional learning, but also our external stakeholders. So thank you.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Sure. I was just curious, what platform are you using for your dashboard?
We're using just Data Studio through Google.
Okay. It looks super nice. Thanks.
And Rachel, I think Ryan Moss and Paul Bauer are 2 experts I put up there against anyone. So if you wanted a tutorial or something like that, I'm sure that they would help with that.
Thank you. Yeah, it looks super slick.
And I was just going to comment, I love that second survey.
Yeah.
Is that something that's new that we'll be doing?
Yes.
I mean, just to how did it sink in 6 weeks later? Are you using it? Did it mean something to you? Blah, blah, blah.
It's something that we've known, and frankly, it's part of the research base from National Learning Forward that wrote an entire workbook, if you will, around what it means to have an effective professional learning system. And they say where sometimes we fall short with the best of intentions is that we don't quantitatively measure student impact related to, so not only does that 6-week survey ask questions about student impact, it also requires them to provide evidence of student growth. related to that. And what supports, like now that you've been doing this for 6 weeks, what supports or extra coaching or support might you need in the future? And then when we're reviewing that or the presenters are reviewing that, that informs like, okay, I thought I was gonna do this with this implementation to support, but they need more support now than I thought, or vice versa, they're not, you know.
Thanks.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And finally, we have research enhance and communicate access to TDA ISD programs in Rachel White and Ashley Darga. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm very happy to report that we're your last group, and also that we have completed our work. So we're super excited that we got to put the green completed next to everything on our slide today. As you can see, we had 3 primary objectives: to compile and organize the current processes for access to North Ed programs, to communicate those processes to some of our other SAIL teams as it overlaps with their work, and then to collaborate with the communication sales team to plan for how are we going to do the ongoing communication of that program access as we go forward. So as you know, our programs are very diverse. We have a really broad range of stakeholders. So one of the really key things for us to do first was to begin by making sure that our committee had broad representation across the ISD, and that we also met with some of those other SAIL committees to see where our work was going to overlap, to make sure we weren't duplicating efforts and that we were being really efficient with our time. From there, we got into how are we going to actually compile this data. And we developed a series of questions that we could take to program leaders to sort of dig in and see how are you communicating? What is your program access? What does it look like? And then how are you communicating that? We're really excited to report that we had 100% engagement with program leaders. Everyone was, just really awesome about getting back to us. I know you've heard all the other groups saying, we sent a survey, we asked people for things, and everyone was just really great about being a team player and engaging with us. So through this process, we compiled all of this data and we discovered a couple of things. All programs are using the website to deliver this information to the appropriate stakeholders. And everybody is very aware of the necessity of keeping this information up to date. And so moving forward, as we shared this information with the communications team, we really got to think about how we're going to make recommendations for programs to check in with their information online in a more, yes, thank you, a more systematic and intentional way, so that there's maybe an annual check-in or whatever makes sense for that program. So those are all of our activities. I'm going to hand it over to Rachel, and she's going to share one of the more exciting outcomes of our work.
Our work felt a little weird to us. We didn't necessarily have an end product or something we could put a bow on to share specifically, but one of the things that I was most interested in is just our center-based programming. So as someone who works with transitioning kids in and out of center-based programming, we didn't necessarily have a smooth kind of one process where every program maybe had a different process or some different ways to access that programming. And something that's been in the works for many years, the supervisors have been working on a process, that kind of a standard protocol for accessing center-based program, whether it be Oak Park, whether it be a MOCI program. So new campus. And so what has started here is Marty and Winnie is working with Heather Jewell on presence on the website, which has not been there yet. So we don't have a specific presence on the website for access. There might be some bits of information for the programming, but not a presence. So these are screenshots from a project that this is the one piece that's ongoing, but it's kind of a subcommittee. It's not really our committee. So Marty Ann and Heather Jewell are in the process of creating web pages that will be part of the North Ed website. Currently, it's been rolled out to all the service area supervisors for kind of their critical review and input from them. The next thing that'll happen is after they've given their input, so Heather and Marty Ann will continue working over the summer on the Fortnite. There'll be a summer retreat with the service area supervisors, in which the final product will get rolled out to them one more time. And then in the fall, it'll be rolled out to the itinerant staff, principals through those specific group meetings. So the intent is that this will be up and ready for the fall. Questions? And I think the last big thing we also did was we have compiled so much data as to how each program reaches its stakeholders. So the website's one way, but you know, many of the subgroups have other ways that they also reach out. And so that data now kind of lives with the communications committee. So they have our spreadsheets, they have all the work and all the information we've gathered. So as the website evolves and as the communications committee continues to work, they have all that information. So it's not kind of lost. TBISD staff and stakeholders have been questioned a lot. Lots of surveys have gone out. I mean, we've really kind of asked people to do a lot, even if they weren't on a committee. People have really been giving a lot of input. And so we didn't want that information to just kind of sit somewhere unknown. And so that was kind of the last thing we did, was share what our work with that communications committee so that it can continue to be part of things that are developed forward.
All right, thank you so much, Rachel and Ashley, really appreciate that. And as we talked about, I mean, you see the immense amount of work that our staff has done over the course really of the last couple of years. So super proud of their work, and the product kind of speaks for itself. So appreciate that.
Next steps.
Well, so the next steps really, there's still a couple obviously that goals that are finishing up. But just a reminder, phase 3 will begin next year, and we'll also simultaneously be by beginning our stakeholder engagement again, so that once we complete sale 1, we'll start to develop over the course of next summer the goals and objectives for sale 2. And so it's a commitment of continuous improvement. So those really would be our next steps next year and moving forward.
A lot of work that's been done.
So sale 2 is 22, 23 school year? Is that what?
So sale 2 would be 22, like 23 school year through 24, 25, no, 25, 26 school year.
But like the process of going through the whole strategic planning 2.0, but that begins when? Like when
Yeah, that'll begin in the fall. So
Fall of next
we'll
year.
engage in focus groups of stakeholders. We'll be providing the board with a report on the stakeholder feedback. It'll be comprehensive needs assessment surveys to all of our stakeholders. And then in the summer, we'll be developing, as we did 2.5 years
So
ago.
this fall, 21 is when it kind of starts all that survey.
Correct.
And then next summer, 22, that's when you get together with the whole stakeholder groups or whatever, the committee, and go through the whole process again.
Correct. The board will, it's usually a 2-day retreat.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay, item 4, board policy, first read distribution.
Yeah, so you have in your packet or email to you, Rachel, I hope you got that from Renee. Thank you to Carol, working with our attorneys. We do need a first read on the do not resuscitate policy and the administration of medication policy. So please review that. We'll be looking for a final read and adoption at the June board meeting so that we can then implement that and meet our timelines. Carol, anything else on that?
No, just the medication policy is just a revision, and that has implications for gathering physician prescriptions for students beginning in the fall. And the do not resuscitate policy is based on legislation that now requires schools to honor those orders. Up until April 4th of 2021, we were prohibited from honoring those orders from a physician. And now we're required, and there's quite a bit of process that will be in the administrative guidelines, but the policy is fairly straightforward.
And that, by the way, is a week from today.
No, it would be our June, I think it's June 14th. 15th, thank you, Linda, June 15th meeting.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Good. I would have been here at 8:15 next Tuesday. Okay, we need a resolution to enter into closed session under section 8A for the purpose of superintendent evaluation. I would make that motion to go into closed session. Okay, all in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, same. All right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Brandy. All right, we're back in open session. There being nothing further on the agenda, then we are adjourned and see you all on June 15th.
Thank you, everyone.